Hey yo, I didn't hear no bell. What's up, Screen Fiend fans? This is the movie review of Rocky for the director's cut, Rocky versus Drago. Sylvester Stallone had decided that he wanted to make Rocky 4, which was the biggest and highest grossing sports film of its time, of all time, for a long period of time. Because that film was, they called it the film that ended the Cold War. When he was going against Russia and Rocky representing the United States fighting Russia, it was a very intense situation. So here's Rocky, this little guy known for fighting giants. But this time the stakes was higher than just like the championship. So it took more of a global effect, with people's fear of Russia at the time. And that fear aspect was going on for a very long time. So this was before the fall of the Soviet Union. And it was like, well, since Rocky won, that kind of crippled the Soviet Union. So it's a whole lot of things that came out of Rocky 4. But let's go over this new version. Now, this new version gets to things pretty quick. It's now available for digital. You can own it on digital now. So you can watch it for yourself. But they start off where Rocky's pretty much, they show him win the title from Mr. T, and they mostly focus on the connection between him and Apollo. That's like evident more in this film and highlighted so that the fight actually means a lot more than what it did the first time around you watched it. But you don't watch Rocky really for emotional content, connection. People show up for the fight. The excitement. They're like, okay, all of this is just like some side dishes till I get to the main event. That's where people stand. Now, when it comes to me, I'm a little different. I like a variety of things. I don't want to be bored for an hour and then all of a sudden I got to fight. So the payoff was watching how well all of these scenes were acted, and unfortunately was cut out and left on the director's floor, but Sylvester Stallone was the director. So he had explained that it wasn't him. It was actually it wasn't actually him. It was actually the studio and money. So they had to cut certain scenes out, and if you've seen them installed in this film, the tone is a little bit different. Now, I do like some scenes that's in the original 4, and I do like some of the score and some of the angles of the shot. It made Drago look more menacing, I believe. He looked more menacing in the first film because they really cut out all his dialogue and just made him very stoic. Where here, he's given kind of the identity of a person who has a voice and wants to be known for his voice, but he can't because the Russian premier and everybody else has their say, and they don't want Drago saying something that might be out of turn. They have someone that speaks for them. So now you see Apollo's motivation and his drive to get in there and fight. And what his motivation truly is. And, he wants to get back in there. He needed this thing. But he also had a scene where he asked Rocky what he was going to do. In the first film, they kind of made it look like Apollo wanted to hijack that moment from Rocky. When in the original tape, it wasn't like that at all. He asked him because they challenged Rocky to an exhibition fight. And Rocky said he don't know. So Apollo was asking him, what were you going to do? Are you going to take this fight? Or so when he said he didn't know, so he said, you don't mind if I step in and take it. So that was a different tone than how it went from the first one. There was a lot more Adrian in this one than in Rocky 4. In Rocky 4, she was pretty much non-existent in Rocky 4. She basically had a no-show job. This one kind of gave her more of a personality. She had more lines. There was more interaction when trying to talk with Apollo about him actually going through this thing to fight Drago. Now, the fight with Creed is a lot more engaging than the first one. The first fight kind of looked like a choreographer dance. This kind of looks more like a fight. Where you see Drago taunting Creed more. You see Creed gets dropped in the first round that they never show in the second fight. And the fight's a little different. It's way more brutal. Both fights. It's more brutal with scenes that they cut. I swear, Rocky hit this dude, Drago, with like 500 punches in the last round alone. I'm like, Jesus, but did they show this scene already? Because he's just drilling him. But I got to understand the vision. You got to see him talk to the Russian commission. They had filmed that scene, but they cut it out of the movie and just showed the newspaper because budget, money, time. Like I told you before, they cut out the whole robot. No more happy birthday, Polly. So Polly was basically a comedic feature in the first film because they had no comic relief, nothing for the kids. And kids love Rocky. But this was more of a serious film. So to bring some levity to it, Paulie became that guy. You know, he was that pretty much in the scenes he was in this movie. But it was minimalized a lot as they cut that robot out of it. Period. They 86 the robot. Now that they 86 the robot, things flipped and start turning. The hands of time was turning. Now everybody's sitting here wondering and playing with their hands and trying to guess and see what's the next move when the move was already made. They still had the music video scene in there, but Rocky, Sylvester Stallone, decided as a director, instead of showing color still shots, when they had the montage to Creed while he's driving, he wanted them kind of like in black and white. You know, to show that they're throwback scenes and show that he's thinking about this. He wanted all those scenes to be in black and white instead of color. Looking at things the second time around to show that he's dwelling on. Me, I never really liked that. You know, that's an old way of doing things. When they used to do throwback scenes, They would always do the throwback scene and make it black and white so that the audience can follow that this must be a throwback scene because it's in black and white. You know, to me, it's kind of played. That's one thing I really didn't care for, seeing the scene in black and white. I'm like, well, we already saw it in color. We know it's the past. And this is a premonition of what you're thinking about right now. I don't need to have it in black and white to know this is your thoughts. We didn't have no problem with that the first time around. Now, let's get to the definition tone and the changes. There were changes made here because of the tension between Russia and America. In here, in this film, they were a lot more hostile, is what they would say about the Russians. And man, this is a propaganda piece. This is all politics. They coming in here. She's trying to play like, oh, he's such a nice guy. All that was cut out because it was the truth, but they wanted to cut that out. The scene with the boxing commission, what they were saying is Rocky's like, oh, you don't think I could take him? They're like, no. A man is dead, and then you got to look at the consequences of that. We put up a title fight for a guy. Let's wait a couple of years. Let's see who this guy really is. We know nothing about him. Next thing you know, let's wait 2 years, then make the fight. A man is already dead in the ring. So the tones, those tones that meant so much in the first film were changed and tweaked. And because of those little subtle changes and tweaks, it made for a more interesting movie. The Russian premiere, they weren't clapping when Rocky said his speech. They gave a damn. They were more mad at the guy that was sitting up there with them, who they ended up leaving and walking off and leaving him because they was disgraced with what had just transpired. Now I gotta go watch Creed 2 when Drago comes back with his son. So I give it 3 stars out of 4. The only reason why I gave it 3 stars out of 4 is the only thing that it's missing is it's like too short. This movie's like an hour and 30 minutes, barely. But you gotta remember, this is an old movie back in '84 where these movies were shorter. I'm like, man, this film just seems like it goes straight to the fight almost. Like, as soon as it starts, they're at Rocky House. I mean, the scenes are very small. But I almost forgot to. Let me not forget. The scene that Tony's giving at Apollo's funeral, I don't even know how you cut that out. That was a great speech. The life of the warrior. You can't buy a speech better than that. I was like, that's gold. Right there, you can't beat that. That's a perfect speech. So, Rocky gave a speech, and he was blaming himself for what happened with Apollo. Then Adrian talks to him. It's an amazing film. Still one of my favorites. Just saying, man, if you grew up in the 80s, you had a pretty good childhood. Anyway, I'm out. God bless. Good night.